Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Issues of the Heart podcast. I'm your host, Brother Kobe.
Rogers.
All right, so last time we were dealing with issues of courtship, and we want to kind of now get into the realm of marriage and look at some of the things that can be for a good marriage and establish some principles. Hand up to you.
Sure. So a lot of different things are there. One thing as a statement, kind of don't forget the things that you did beforehand in terms of courtship, the things that were of interest to you. It's easy, very easy. If you are married or if you've been in a relationship for a period of time, it's easy just to take one another for granted. Not that you're setting out to do that, but it's easy for it to happen. You're busy with work, you're busy with kids, you're busy with other obligations and commitments and so forth. And if it's not kind of set in there in terms of personal time, then it doesn't happen. So one thing that I have learned and still learning, because I know my wife's like, hey, you need to definitely make sure you have time, is to set time up, to set, okay, we're going to have this time for a date time. And so there is an idea that we can find in the scriptures. And so the Bible says, remember therefore from whence thou art fallen. That's in Revelation chapter 2. This isn't anything about falling, but it's the idea, though, of remembering the first works back in Revelation chapter 2. So those things that first, attracted you, because you can easily fall into a rut where, all right, I'm not going to quote, take care of myself. And sometimes it just happens in marriage. You get married, you don't necessarily need to take care because it's like, it's a hunt. Mm-hmm. And not trying to use that in a derogatory way, so I don't want to be taken in that respect. But you're like, okay, I'm going to put forth my best foot forward. I'm going to make sure, my hair is cut. I want to make sure I'm groomed. I want to make sure I'm polished. All those different things. And it's easy, you get married, like, okay, well, I'm not trying to attract anybody, and it's not that you're trying to be quote disrespectful or that you're trying to take this person for granted. It's just that a switch happens in the brain where it's like, okay, well, I'm not quote unquote trying to do anything. It's just us now. But that's not the case in that respect. So it's important then to be able to remember those things so we can continue to build on them and to nourish it. Second component, of course, is always important is communication. Jesus talks a lot about communication. He says, let your yea be yea and let your nay be nay. And there's oftentimes with communication that conversations, they don't take place as often and as much, and they can easily revolve around, problems that take place in the home, challenges the kids have, things that take place on the job and so forth. And those things are important and need to be certainly discussed. But there's also the realm of, well, let's talk about us. What can we do so to make sure that in the process that we are not, quote, growing apart, but we're still able to maintain, we're still able to grow in that respect. So one of the texts that I want to look at is the book of Amos chapter 3. Amos chapter 3, and that's a different principle that's there. But as we draw from it, though, we'll see again that it specifically is helping us in the way that we're trying to go. In Amos chapter 3 and verse 3. And it says that can two walk together except they be agreed. Okay, and so meaning we're going to the same direction. We're going to have to find a dialogue and discussion. And this is what marriage is about. Hey, we're trying to go on this way to this destination. So going here, how are we able to put that together? Well, we have to be on the same page. We have to have the same direction. Doesn't mean that we have to be in, quote, total agreement with each other. But it means, though, that we have to have some general principles that we talk about, that we're in agreement. We have the same desire. We share our goals, our visions, our hopes, all those things. That's what you got married for, right? Somebody you talked about in Genesis 2 that helped me. And so it's a process of, what are our goals as a family? What are we trying to accomplish? How are we going to be able to get there? And what can I do to be able to help you to be able to achieve yours? And what are you going to do to be able to help me to achieve mine? Because this is a collaborative mission that's taking place. And there's so many different things that are coming to try to short circuit that, to try to interrupt it, because Satan sees what's taking place, and you trying to grow in your family. You're trying to be the husband that God would want you to be. You're trying to be the wife that God would have you to be. And the enemy certainly wants to bring in confusion. And there's some things that just happen just because we don't know. We haven't learned, how to resolve different issues, like how to talk to each other, like how to have a conversation, and that we can have a quote difference of opinion. And we don't have to cuss each other out. We don't have to have a fight about it. We can just, you state, I have a conversation, you have a conversation. We're sharing, and yet we're at the same time willing to not hurt somebody. Like, okay, I'm talking not to hurt you, but I'm talking to be able to share, and from it that we can learn whatever, some of the challenges in our marriage. We can talk about those things, and then to be able to try to put our best foot forward always.
Yeah, one of the things when you look at it, honor your father and your mother that your days may be long upon the land which the Lord your God gives you. It's like, well, why? When you talk about marriage, you're bringing up honor your father and your mother. One of the things I think people miss out on, and it's almost kind of going back to the courtship mindset, but bringing your parents into that decision of marriage. A lot of people leave their parents out of it. There's a lot of stealing of hearts of the daughters of God's people when it's breaking the commandment of stealing, when you go behind the parents' back and you are winning her heart to yourself without the parents' knowledge. And so you're gaining an influence that maybe they can't talk her out of a bad decision. And the reason why I say that is, the Bible established a principle that this dowry system. And before you can go and court or date a girl, you have to go get permission from the parents first. And I remember, and we weren't dating at the time, but Otis used to have the dinners that he used to invite people over to when he was up here. And so I went to it. And you know how the rumor mill gets to going. So somebody said something about Kobe and Patrice. And so he called me and said, hey, go, let's go on a walk. So I'm walking with him. And so he asked me, you liking Patrice, huh? And I'm like, is she cool?
She cool.
Well, I ain't asked you was she cool. I asked you did you like it. So since he pressed the issue, I'm like, fine, yeah, I like her. And so we get to talking a little bit more. But then the next morning I get a call. And he wanted us to meet early in the morning. So I go over there. Her dad, her mom, she's there, her sister. And basically he wanted me to formally ask permission, to take her on. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll ask. Although we weren't dating before, but that's the proper way to go. And so we want to bring the parents into that decision, because a lot of people feel like, I'm going to leave them out of this decision because they might say something I don't like, or we may feel that, they're not in the church, so they can't tell me anything. Well, one thing your parents have is life experience.
Sure.
And so we should not leave them out of that decision and moving forward, because sometimes we can get blinded by their relationship and we just want to move so fast, and other people may have a perspective that we don't have, and so we need to be able to listen to wise counsel in that regard. And so I think kind of that dowry system needs to be brought back to a certain extent. And we're going to talk about that too, because when it comes to marriage, there's some things that, ought to be brought out. This text in Proverbs is powerful. Look what it says here. I'm going to read it from two different versions, the Good News and the Amplified. It says, Proverbs chapter 24 and verse 27. It says, don't build your house and establish a home until your fields are ready and you are sure that you can earn a living. I'm reading from the Amplified. It says, prepare your work outside and get ready for yourself in the field. And get it ready for yourself in the field. Afterwards, build your house and establish a home. And what they're saying is, you trying to establish a home, a household, wife, kids, and so forth, you ain't even establishing yourself in a career or a job. And so while you're out there looking, don't be like this, looking for a wife without looking like this for a job first. Establish yourself. And you brought it up the last time that, you're going in the dowry system, you had to bring, this some monies to show that, hey, I'm able to provide for a family. So you come in showing that, hey, I'm even Jacob, even though he didn't have anything, he said, look, I worked for 7 years for her. Wound up being 14 months. It wasn't the work to establish this. And so what wrecks a lot of marriages initially is like, y'all gonna get married and move back to your parents' house? Although the Bible said you should leave father and mother. Yeah. You see, and so when you take that step, you have to be in a position where you're able to establish a home. So he said, before you try to start a home, have you established yourself in the field? Have you prepared yourself in a career? You have people that they want to look for a wife, they want to try to build a home, and they haven't established themselves in a career and a job. You don't know who you are, you don't know what God wants you to be, you don't have any purpose in life, yet you're trying to take this quantum leap here. And so you're going to wind up making a mess of things. And so we have to be earnest and think about that. So if two people are thinking about coming together, all right, well, who are you? What is your mission and goal in life? Have you established it? Do you have a job? Can you support a household? All of these things need to be considered first. And so the Bible lays, and again, one of the things about it is, and we talked about it before, there's an ideal that God has. And sometimes everybody can't meet those ideals, but as far as possible, if you're at the start line and you have it, going further first, all right, this is what you want to try to establish. And so God set this up here because, again, a lot of marriages can be wrecked doing things the opposite of what God said to do. I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, when you talk, just to clarify, you're talking about establishing yourself. We're not saying, okay, you need to have, quote, X amount of dollars in terms of, here. That's going to come in time. Yeah. But what you are saying, though, is, okay, I don't want to be broke. Yeah. Right? Okay, it's like, I don't have a job. We're just going to live off love. Because you have people, like, hey, we're just going to, I can't buy you a Big Mac. And I want to get married. Now, I'm living at home. I don't have a place. And so forth. That's the whole idea. Not again, you have to make six figures. Or you have to, you have a bunch of different assets and so forth. Now, if you have it, great. But again, the baseline is that you're in your own place. Yeah. We'll say, right? You have a job. You have a way of being able to support, because that's the whole idea. Is I'm supporting you. So in that dowry system, in ancient biblical times, like, okay, well, the woman, she was coming in. They were, of course, from a agrarian society, meaning that they farmed their lands and cattle and so forth. That's what they did and took care of. But the man's duty was to take care of the wife. It wasn't, the woman didn't go out and work. And so some people today would say, well, women shouldn't work because that's evil and so forth. Well, that's not the idea of what the Bible is saying. We look at the times in which the Bible was written. It was not a quote unquote a common experience for quote women to go out into work. Of course, you're talking about in the different examples that are used. But if you look in the context of Genesis, though, Eve was working right beside her husband, though, right? So it was work that was being done. It was not that work was like a panacea that people didn't do and so forth, but it was done. So in the context of a home, though, having an established career, knowing that this is what I'm going to do. So if I'm, just a broke student as such, if I'm just getting by just, running a little hustle here and there, then that's not, quote unquote, the best time to go on to get married. And the reason being is because, again, we talked about the spiritual component. But aside from that, you talk about divorces and the stresses of marriage, finances is a huge thing, because we don't have the money. It's like, all right, it's cool hanging out, but when we're hungry, when we can't buy clothes, when the car is not working, all that stuff puts stress down. And you're going to have stressful components and so forth that's coming down. So we can be able to attack those. And when you talk about marriages and relationships, the biggest challenges are family, and money and religion. So if you can agree and already have religion taken care of, okay, well, that eliminates and knocks down to two of them. And then the other two aspects that oftentimes crop up again are money problems and fights. And then, what we call the in-laws and the outlaws. Sometimes, family is just too much in the mix. And so again, we read that when you quoted the text, that God said, look, man shall marry his wife and he's going to cleave father and mother, meaning that God intends now that she be the one that has that devotion. Not that you don't still respect your parents and you don't still have honor for them, but this is now a sacred circle that he is building up. There's, husband and wife and God, right? That's it. It's nobody else that's coming in. That's a sacred thing. And one of the other challenges that can come in is that when you start sharing problems to other people that can't benefit the relationship. I think there is a time to share. Maybe you sit down with a counselor, as husband and wife, or they don't want to get counseling and so forth, but just, you go and talk about all the pitfalls of your wife to your family. And she's talking about all your pitfalls to her family. And then when you back together, that's all they remember. Yeah. Is, these problems and how you did her wrong, how she did you wrong. And those things are there. So that's not healthy. That's not wise. That's not promoting a situation. But a lot of that can be avoided, as you mentioned just at the beginning, getting counsel from your parents. And so even though, again, maybe they're not, quote unquote, believers, they still know you. Right? And if they love you as a parent, they're going to look and say, you know what, that's not a good person. Or I could see you being happy with that person. But to be able to listen to them, don't be so spiritually proud that you feel that the only counsel you can receive is from a person that, quote unquote, is on the same spiritual, quote, level as you are.
Now, and the thing about that is people that are normally wise in all other areas, when it comes to that courtship marriage, they seem to lose all common sense. So they need somebody else from the outside trying to give them counsel. one of the things about it is, in Genesis 35, you see Jacob setting up an altar, and he tells his, sons in his household, hey, put away these idols and these gods that you have had. But the point with that is the family altar is so important. One of the things about marriage is the Bible talks about a threefold union is not easily broken. And so we need God as the center of the relationship. And so that family altar, the family that prays together, stays together. We understand this. And so come together, bonding, in prayer and getting counsel from the Word of God to guide our life that can add the peace to a home, because you're inviting the presence of God in your home morning and evening. And so that family altar is so important to a marriage. And so we don't want to leave that out. And you brought up before communication. Communication is so important to a marriage, to just have open dialogue. And, the thing about, relationships, sometimes certain people that may be, that are outside the household, maybe you, like a co-worker or somebody else, you may be afraid to tell them certain things about themselves that you see, or you might only tell them when you get really mad. But when it's somebody like a brother, sister, husband, and wife type of situation, it should be easy to communicate and have these conversations. I don't know why people hold back. I'm not going to bring this up. I'm not going to say this. But the way you say it, and just having those communications about, maybe something gets on your nerve. Maybe you don't like a certain thing. It needs to be communicated. So proper communication in a marriage is just so important to maintaining it and having it be healthy. And one last thing, I'm going to let you go comment on these things. One thing I do want to bring up is sex in a marriage. Is that important? I say it is, but we're going to get what you the law of kindness, being in the home, cannot be stressed enough. Speaking gentle, kind words to one another. And so we want to remember the law of kindness and politeness in the home. Just having that, gentle spirit about ourselves and how we deal with one another. And so we want to make sure we have that in the house.
So when you talk about communication and dialogue, one thing with it that sometimes we do is that we sometimes won't say what, either some people just rude. It's like, hey, first thing, boom, they fly off. And some people just let things accumulate. I think it's wise to be able to figure out, okay, what's worth talking about, and the Isaiah says, look, don't make a man an offender for a word. So let's not be nitpicky over certain situations and figure, okay, well, some things, I can let that go, and not to think evil of another person, because that can so much jade the relationship. And so, like, as an example, maybe you told your spouse to, hey, when you come in, I appreciate if you take off your shoes at the door and so forth, so it doesn't track mud in. And they come in, they don't take their shoes off at the door, and mud is on the floor. Now, I could easily jump up and what, this, she don't love me. He don't love me, because they did, they wouldn't have tracked all this mud on the floor and so forth. I need to take it to that whole different level. Now I'm taking to an element of, they don't love me because this is taking place. And the person came to the door, it's not, again, excusing their actions. They should have taken off their shoes because you've asked them to and so forth. Maybe they forgot. Maybe they didn't care. And that's kind of worst case scenario, but let's paint it from the best case scenario. Maybe they forgot. Okay, if I'm in that frame of mind, all right, they walked in and they didn't take their shoes off, and now, okay, I'm already here. I'm ready to blow up, because I told you before, take the shoes off. So they don't love me. Okay, so now I'm probably going to come at you with the foul spirit, because I'm already mad. I'm already ticked off with what took place. And so it's hard for me to be able to, basically ask, hey, what happened? And then be able to have the conversation without making a decision, without knowing all the details. Now, on the other side of it, okay, maybe they just came in like, okay, hey, whatever. To them, maybe it's not that big of a deal. And again, if I'm taking it to the point of, well, they don't love me because they did this, that can set up a toxic and a bad situation that's there. Certainly, you want to treat people with respect. You want to treat them with love, but don't make it where I didn't dump the trash. This person don't love me. You didn't wash the dishes. This person doesn't love me, and so forth. Where love is tied into, quote unquote, these different things and the expression of them as such. Now, again, there are some things that are, that are downright hateful and mean. If a person curses somebody out, a person is abusive to somebody, that's something different. Again, not on the same level as they forgot to take the trash out. It's not on the same level as they didn't, make up the bed. And again, this doesn't mean not to do those things, but they can be misconstrued. And a lot of times in just in relationships, things can be misconstrued. In the interest of time, I'll just quote the story. But it was the tribes of there were 2.5 tribes didn't go over on the Jordan, and so they said there was Reuben, Gad, and it was Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh. They stayed on the east side of Jordan. They didn't go on the other side. And they said, look, we're going to build us an altar because we don't want it to happen down the road that the other tribes forget that we're serving the same God. So they ended up building an altar. The altar was called Ed. They built this altar. And so when the tribes on the other side, they heard there was an altar there, they're like, you know what? They're tripping over there. They're about to worship a God. And don't they know of all the calamities that fell upon us from worshiping other gods? You know, they gathered up. They're about to go off to war. Yeah. And they went in, and before they got to battle, they were able to basically find out what happened. In the process then of a conversation, it all ended up being a misunderstanding. And a lot of times, that back to communication. We already formed our opinion because you came in and you saw something, and we jumped to conclusions. We don't understand and know what's going on, and we've already formulated. Our emotions are high. We're upset. And it's a problem, and so we're ready to respond that way, and it's not going to be good. And so, although the scripture says, "Don't let the sun go down on your wrath," there are times in which we just need to say, you know what, I'm not in the frame of mind to be able to talk about this tonight. I'm not. Maybe something went bad at work. Maybe there's a problem, with you psychologically, health-wise, or whatever. It's like, okay, I'm not in a good mood, and all right, if we talk about it, it's gonna blow up and it's gonna go wrong. So nothing wrong with saying, you know what, honey, I'm just not in a good place right now. Can you give me an hour, or can we talk about it in the morning? Whatever the case may be. So it's not ducking, dodging it. It's just saying, look, let's get it in the right frame of mind so we can be able to talk about it in a way that objectively, we're going to be able to come together. Because the point of it is, I'm not trying to win the conversation and to lose my spouse, but I want to be able to, hear what they're saying and understand what they're saying. And understanding doesn't mean I agree. It just means, okay, I see what you're saying. Back to the shoe situation. I see what you're saying, that, all right, if I don't take off my shoes and I bring you in the mud, I see how that brings extra work on you. I didn't, wasn't my intention to do that, but I get it. I see it. I understand it. And a lot of times in terms of saying, I see it, I understand it, it doesn't mean I agree with what your conclusion is, but okay, I see how you could feel like that. I see how you could state that. I understand where you're coming from, and I'll make some changes on my part so that that's not an issue, because that's really what communication is. And in marriage, in time, it tends to decrease, because you think back when you were courting, people be on the phone for like 5 hours, right? And it's like you're just hearing each other breathe and stuff. Well, when you get married, you're not trying to be on the phone in here. It changes, right? But you still want to have some time for communication. So I would say then the communication certainly is going to be less, but it's still important to be able to take time. And then when you converse, it doesn't blow off into an argument. And when you see that it's going to go off the rails, then there's nothing wrong with just, hey, let's stop, let's pray, or let's stop and just, take, you go to your space, I go to my space, because it's not just to blow up, it's to have a conversation.
Yeah, let me say this before we get into the sex thing. You don't lose yourself in your spouse. You're able to have your own personality, your own identity. You don't merge. And just because you become one flesh, you don't have to see eye to eye with every single thing, And so the important things you can be in agreement on, but you're able to have your own personality, your own desires, your own outlook on certain things. That don't mean you have to agree on everything. So people need to know that.
Oh yeah, Some people think you got to be the same.
Yeah. And so now let's get to all the points. Is sex important for marriage?
Well, you already said it was.
Because some people say you should only have sex to procreate. Other than that, you shouldn't.
Okay, so we talked indirectly about that in one of the previous times we talked, when we talked about Genesis with Tamar and Onan, when essentially you can go back and look at it. God condemned him not because he didn't want to have a child, but because the big context of it was that he was simply unwilling to raise up a seed unto his brother, and so that his brother would have the possessions and so forth. So when it was in the process of having sex or making love, he chose not to impregnate her. So that was what God condemned. So no, sex is not for the purpose of just procreation. Sex has a multitude of functions. Procreation, be for pleasure, and there's nothing wrong with that. It could be for enjoyment, and that's totally fine. And so in the context of marriage, again, it's sacred. So nothing that is defiled, nothing that is wrong. And so marriage is honorable, and the bed is undefiled. So God intends a sanctity to rest upon it. And so he gave sex in, again, not to just to have kids. Because if that's the case, then people always have kids. But you go back to, Paul said, look, you got to provide for your own household. And so there comes a point where you don't have the financial resources, unless you're Bill Gates of the world, to continue to have, kid after kid after kid after kid. And of course, in that context, it's not just the money, but it's the psychological thing. Having a kid, just, the psychological impact, the emotional impact, the spiritual well-being. There's a lot of different, it's not just, do I have the money in my pocket to take care of a child? There's the whole dynamic is there. So, no. So in fact, I will say this, the Hasidic Jews, they felt that sex was so important that it was important to begin the Sabbath having sex. So that was how they felt about it in the matter.
Yeah. Remember Hebrews chapter 13 verses 3 or something like that said that marriage is holy and the bed undefiled. And so, the thing about it is, you read Song of Solomon, this, people, again, with the spiritualizing everything, want to make it about Christ and the church. Solomon writing this love song to his spouse, but when you look at the sexual nature of it, I remember I was talking with some Mormons, and they felt like because of the contents of it and everything that they didn't belong in the Bible, because all the sexual language that's there. So God doesn't shy away from it. We tend to, not me, but people tend to shy away from these things and try to ignore something that's natural and that God created. God created sex, and also for pleasure. So it's not just to procreate. And in marriage, sex won't sit and tear down a marriage, but a good, healthy sex life would help a marriage. And so we can't act like, all right, sex this doesn't play a part. It's not important. There, because it's able to bond and bring two people together in a very intimate way. So it is important, and let us remember that with a whole bunch of other things. Now, again, there's a whole bunch of stuff we can talk about in reference to this. If you want to say something, you got about a minute.
Yeah. Okay. So, I didn't get the chance to read it. So, but to your point, that's 1 Corinthians chapter 7. That's what Paul talks about. Look, it's better to marry than to burn. And that's talking about burn in hell fire, because some people's like, you can burn in hell because you have lust or you trying to have sex. No, he's saying, look, it's better to go ahead and marry and to have your pleasures fulfilled than to be unmarried and just burn in this desire. That's what he's talking about. So again, context of marriage is such. So sex God has created. There's nothing that is wrong with it. And Wesley taught that. He also thought that Song of Solomon didn't belong, but no, it's a love story, because God's author of love. There's nothing that's wrong with that. He created us, in His divine image. So that you pointed it out.
Yeah. Well, that's our time for today. Again, there were so many things that we could have a whole another series on this, but that's our time for today. And we thank you for tuning in. And remember the proverb: keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life.